So welcome to part 2 of VMworld coverage. And I mentioned in the previous video that I thought the show was pretty well attended. I did get a little pushback on that because some people were pointing out the fact that they moved it from Vegas, which was a multi-hotel, multi-resort sort of endeavor, to San Francisco, and some of the spaces were sort of smaller. So while the attendance might have been a little bit lower, it seemed a little bit more packed because the venue was just a little bit smaller. And also, people did make note that they had a lot of VMware employees in attendance because it was in San Francisco and they could do that. But that said, I still believe that there was a lot of activity on the show floor. There was a lot of activity in the booths. They were having really meaningful conversations and really digging into some of these technologies. So I'm going to stand by the fact that I think it was a good audience. It may not have been the biggest audience they've ever had, but I still think it was a very good audience. And I don't think the vendors were disappointed. When I talked to the vendors, they all seemed to say they were hitting their numbers pretty well and that they were getting a lot of good leads. So I'll go with that. And it's worth mentioning that I've heard other trade shows struggling this year to get attendance numbers up. That goes back to one of the reasons why I go and do this, is because people just don't have the budgets anymore. They're not getting the allocations for going to trade shows and doing some of these educational trips. And so what I'm trying to do is go there, film these things, bring some good tidbits back, interview some people, and bring that back to all you folks who don't get to go. So hopefully this is useful in that regard. So in my last video, I talked about VMware's embracing of Kubernetes and cloud and containerization. The sense is that Kubernetes is emerging as a standard, and VMware has launched a project called Tanzu that is all about Kubernetes. Tanzu is a portfolio of products and services for building Kubernetes applications, and Tanzu has all the components to build, run, and maintain these environments. And it focuses heavily on the enterprise market. So another big project that they were talking about was Project Pacific. And Project Pacific is all about integrating Kubernetes into vSphere. So VMware had already dabbled in this space with PKS, but now they're going fully in by completely integrating Kubernetes into vSphere. The thing that's cool about this is it gives enterprises the ability to manage their container resources along with their virtualized server instances. And this one centralized point of management could be a very powerful tool for the enterprise. So Pat Gelsinger said a lot of controversial things at the keynote, but one of the things that was really interesting that he talked about was he said that Bitcoin use cases are about 95% illicit or criminal activity, and that the energy required for a single transaction in Bitcoin equals the energy output of a household. And he's not wrong about these numbers. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about how energy intensive Bitcoin mining and managing these distributed ledgers can be. So VMware is producing a distributed ledger product that is going to be apparently much less energy intensive and more focused on solving real enterprise problems. So that'll be really interesting to see what they come up with on that front. Another interesting development that I think is worth talking about is partnering with NVIDIA around GPU virtualization. So that project with NVIDIA is producing virtual compute servers, or vCompute servers, and this is on VMware Cloud and AWS. So there were a lot of acquisitions leading up to VMworld, but the Carbon Black and Pivotal acquisitions were announced at VMworld, so they drew a tremendous amount of attention. Pivotal had a big presence on the show floor, as did Carbon Black, not quite as big. Some of the other ones were there, like Avi and some of those, but Pivotal probably had the most significant presence on the floor. So I want to take a moment here and highlight some of the smaller companies who are exhibiting at the show. I love some of the innovation and some of the ideas that are coming out of some of these companies. They're not big companies necessarily, but they have sometimes a big impact. So I just wanted to give them a moment to shine. few years back, storage was really big at VMworld. There were still a lot of storage players there, but not to the level that there had been in the past. There were a lot of companies with a lot of focus on cloud. So outside of VMware's Kubernetes rollout, there were a lot of other companies that are playing in the Kubernetes space. So I'm really curious to see how VMware's announcements around Kubernetes are really going to impact some of these smaller companies, because they are directly competing with VMware now. And we've seen in the past that VMware is not shy about cannibalizing some of their ecosystem when they see a product that is really strategic to them, and Kubernetes is clearly one of those. So we'll see how everyone fares in the ecosystem around this. So another area that I find really compelling is around disaggregation and composable infrastructure. And there were some players out there talking about this. Certainly HPE and their Synergy line have really validated the composable infrastructure market. One of the other companies playing in this space is Liquid, Liquid. I have an interview with them that I'm going to be posting shortly, so keep an eye out for that. What Liquid does is they allow the provisioning of physical hardware assets much in the same way that you would deploy virtual or container-based systems like in vSphere. And I think these products are really relevant to what VMware is doing, because they are telling a story of on-prem, cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. And from the on-prem perspective, these composable infrastructure systems allow you to manage and utilize resources much more efficiently to get you some of the cloud dynamics in terms of costing on your infrastructure systems. Another area that was drawing a lot of attention was around edge computing and 5G. A lot of these edge computing devices are really critical for the telcos building these 5G networks because of all the communication and functionality that goes on between all of the 5G devices. But there was a lot of companies pitching 5G applications, 5G networks, and 5G capabilities. 5G is going to bring a lot more bandwidth, a lot more throughput, a lot more density to our wireless telecommunications infrastructure, and it's going to allow for a massive amount of connected devices. And VMware was talking a lot about edge computing and 5G. So I don't know much about this company, but I just really like the form factor of their device. I don't know how practical it is in the enterprise. It had connectors that you could just stack the devices and they interconnected, which I thought was kind of cool. They're making an edge play. Like I said, I don't know how good the product is or anything about the product. I just kind of thought the form factor was really interesting. So I'm showing that here. So overall, I thought it was a really great show. I thought that it was cool to see that VMware is getting its mojo back. I think VMware is going to be a really significant player going forward, which is cool because I was seeing them sort of slinking off into obscurity. But now I think they've got some really compelling things going on. And so I'm excited to see what comes of VMware. I've got some interviews and other cool content coming up, so keep checking back. I will see you in the next video.